I'm leaving my Invisalign in today, so apologies for everything. Hello and welcome back. If you're new to my channel, I make videos about living with a 40-item wardrobe as well as home decluttering, and I've had a lot of questions from you guys recently about sustainable and ethical fashion, where I buy my clothes, what brands are trustworthy, what fabrics to think about buying when you want to be mindful about the fabrics in your closet. And so today I've decided to share some of the principles that I think about that I think are really foundational to building a sustainable closet. At the end, I'll also share some more woke, if you will, brands that are a lot more mindful about sustainable and ethical practices that you can consider when you need to add to your wardrobe. But before I talk about brands, there are some principles that I want to share that to me are more important than the brands you buy your clothes from. I think these are incredibly important considerations to keep in mind when thinking about the impact of an individual closet or the fashion industry overall. First and foremost, if you're interested in this topic, it's likely because you've had some unsustainable practices in the past that you want to correct and find alternatives for in the future. And that is wonderful. But one thing I want to stress is that you don't need to go out and replace every item that currently exists in your closet that's from an unsustainable or an unethical or a fast fashion brand with items of clothing that are from a sustainable and ethical supply chain in order to have a sustainable closet yourself. If you already have items of clothing that are working for your tastes and your lifestyle, then keep those items. Don't feel like you need to go out and replace them with other things just because they come from a more sustainable or ethical brand. That's sort of the equivalent of ripping out like beautiful mahogany floors that are just fine and replacing them with bamboo flooring just because bamboo is technically more sustainable. So if you have pieces that are working for you, then maintaining those, wearing those as much as you possibly can, getting as much use out of them as you possibly can is the most sustainable option you can take. The next principle I want to mention is to think about the footprint of an item and buy locally whenever that's at all an option to you. Now, fast fashion has a lot of serious negative environmental impact, not only because of poor manufacturing processes, but also because they tend to source for labor where it's cheap and then ship the merchandise all across the globe. Shipping an item from the other side of the planet definitely has a much heavier carbon footprint than something that is sourced and made a lot closer to you. Now, I realize that most of us don't have organic cotton farmers living in our backyard that also know how to spin that material into yarn and fabric and dye it and tailor it and get that all the way to a consumer. So I'm not trying to create that expectation. I just think an important thing to consider when making a purchase is the footprint of that item. Now, I know there are some brands out there that provide opportunities for women and other artisans in places that might not be geographically close to you, and that's really admirable, and it's definitely a better option to buy from brands like that than from brands that use sweatshops. I still think, however, that it's important to think about the provenance of an item and how far it has to travel before it reaches your closet. Another thing to consider are materials. I made a bit of an error that I want to redact, so I'll just talk over this one. To me, natural materials are always best, things like cotton, linen, silk, and wool. There are some semi-synthetic fabrics like viscose rayon that may say that they're recycled, which is technically true, but they do require many super dangerous chemicals to actually be made into fabric. Now, something like lyocell is similar to viscose rayon, but it's made with much less harsh chemicals, so it's a better option, but when in doubt, stick to natural materials. The one thing I suggest avoiding are synthetic fabrics. Now, synthetics are created from using coal and petroleum, and they're incredibly cheap, and so they're incredibly prevalent in fast fashion because of their cheapness. Are they easy to avoid? Not at all. Is it possible? Yes, unless you're looking for stretchy black pants, in which case, good luck. Another reason to avoid synthetics is that they can lead to getting microplastic particles into our waterways. So because synthetic fabrics are oil-derived plastics, when we wash them, little plastic fibers can come off of them and get into our water, and so far we haven't found a way to get those out of our water supply. So if you have something like a smooth polyester shirt, that's much less likely than something like an acrylic sweater or a synthetic fleece to produce microplastic particles whenever you wash it, but I still recommend avoiding synthetics whenever possible. It's a great way to vote with your dollars and encourage the use of more natural materials. Another factor to consider is cost. So if you buy a dress for $20, part of that money goes towards the material, part goes to shipping, part goes to company costs and marketing and the retail associate who sold that garment to you, and a very small sliver of that price goes to the person who actually made the garment. So it means it was probably sourced with cheap labor and unfair wages paid to the person who actually made it. Now, I realize that very few of us have the luxury of not thinking about cost at all when it comes to clothing purchases, but sustainably sourced and ethically produced clothing does not come cheap. Now, this also doesn't mean that paying a lot of money for an item necessarily means that it was sourced from sustainable materials and ethically made. Not at all. It definitely does not mean that. But if you're looking at a piece of clothing that claims to be sustainably sourced and ethically made, and it has a price tag that's too good to be true, it probably is. The last thing I suggest considering is whether or not you'll actually wear a garment and how long you'll get use out of it. So my personal philosophy whenever it comes to my wardrobe is to wear what I have as much as possible and to shop as infrequently as I can. Now, I have made a video on how to make responsible shopping decisions, and I'll link that down below in case you're interested in watching it. But do I only shop from sustainable and ethical brands? No. I do look there first, but when I can't find what I'm looking for from a sustainable and ethical brand, sometimes I have no other option, and I would rather buy a piece that's to my taste and that fits and that I know I'm going to get a lot of use out of, rather than a piece of clothing that came from a sustainable and ethical brand that I don't like and that I'm not going to wear. So as with all purchasing decisions, really consider how much use you're going to get out of a garment, whether or not it's something you're going to wear for a long time, and see if it's something that will actually last and stand up to the test of time. The best way to keep clothing out of landfill is to shop infrequently and get the most out of the items you have. Now, onto what many of you are probably here for, let's talk about brands. Now, as far as brands go, I haven't done much shopping because, again, my core philosophy is to get as much use out of what I already have, but I do have one item from Everlane. Everlane is now very mainstream. They started several years back with this concept of sort of radical transparency and really showing the consumer where the cost for a particular garment came from in their supply chain. Now, I only have one item from Everlane. I do really like it, and they are more mindful than other brands out there about paying workers a fair wage. Now, where I think they suffer a bit is that they don't show you a lot of transparency into their materials sourcing. So I haven't seen a lot of, say, organic cotton or really any visibility into how they supply their materials. They also primarily produce their items from China and other South Asian countries, so for somebody like me here in the United States, that still does have to travel a very long way. Is it perfect? No. Is it better than H&M? Absolutely. And they also are fairly affordable in comparison with some other options out there. Now, we talked about price earlier, so take that how you will, but the sweater that I have costs, I paid $120 for it, it's now $100. And I know they have t-shirts for like $20 to $30 and jeans for a very reasonable $60. The next brand I want to mention is one that I haven't personally tried, but is high on my list to try next, and it is Quiana. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, but they are a brand based out of California whose philosophy is fewer, better. So they encourage having fewer items in your closet, but items that are better made and made to a higher standard. So they claim to create clothing out of quality materials, and they source their manufacturing out of Europe, South America, and the United States. And sort of similar to Everlane, their offerings are mostly sort of modern basics, but in my opinion, with a little bit of a twist. Now, one thing I like about this company, in addition to their items online being beautiful, is that they offer something called Lean Closet. So whenever you make a purchase online, you can check a box that says Lean Closet, and if you do that, they will send you a linen bag that you can then fill with whatever clothing you don't want anymore and mail it back to them. And when you do, they will give you a $10 credit towards your next purchase. So everybody wins. Another brand worth checking out is Patagonia. So Patagonia is sort of an outdoor sportswear brand. They are very involved in sort of political discussions around preserving national land. They have a lot of charities for national parks, and they also have a CEO who actively discourages customers from buying more clothing than they need. And I can't think of any other retail brand that has a CEO like that. They use recycled materials, they also offer traceable down, and their garments are really made to last. And when something on a Patagonia garment breaks, you can bring it into a retail store and they will fix it for you. They also offer something called Worn Wear online, where you can sell back to Patagonia used Patagonia clothing, and they will clean it, repair it, and offer it online at a discount for other buyers. Now, there are lots of other brands out there, brands like Reformation and People Tree and Eileen Fisher, but since I don't have a lot of experience with them, I didn't really want to talk about them, but it's really easy to go online and do a little bit of research, and more brands are adopting this philosophy because people like you and me are demanding it. All right, those are all of the principles and brands that I wanted to share with you today, and I know there are so many factors to consider when trying to build and maintain a sustainable and ethical wardrobe, and these are just a few of the considerations that I like to keep in mind, so I hope they come in handy as you approach your wardrobe. They can be things that you sort of keep in your back pocket to help you to create that for yourself and maintain it moving forward. And I know that shopping for anything, even from traditional brands, can be difficult enough, and so trying to shop and source your clothing from sustainable and ethical brands adds just an extra layer of complexity on top of everything. But when you're actually able to find clothing that you like from brands that care, it can be so much more rewarding. As always, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.